reports of the film, everyone was having the heyday is, oh, this guy, he's this megalomaniac guy, he's gone crazy out there in the Philippines, the movie is a disaster, the rumor is the movie is terrible, it will never be released. So I also, my feelings were really hurt because I thought, gee, no one's saying, here's this guy, he's courageous, he's making a movie about Vietnam when no one was willing to touch it, and you're all kind of putting me down for taking this chance, whereas everyone's saying, oh, this movie about Superman is this great hit, here's a guy flying around in a funny suit. Right. It was invented in 1941 anyway, and that's the big news. And that kind of movie's still being made and being dominated. You go to the movie theater tomorrow night, you're going to see the same thing,
Listen, I don't get the superhero stuff, and I don't get the 40 and 50-year-old guys that are speaking out loud at parties about their love of the Green Lantern or how disappointed they were in the last X-Men movie. It's like, it's a comic book. It's for kids. You're supposed to get over it.
Well, it's a comic book combined with a theme park ride. And they're all the same, and they all use the effects the same way. That's if you want to make movies, if you want to be a professional filmmaker today, that's the kind of movies you're going to have the chance to make.
It's insane.
You're lucky.
I can't, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but I can't believe they're making like Land of the Lost, the movie. That was the worst TV show on television, animated or not, in my childhood, and they're making, I was saying to someone the other day, they're going to make Slinky the movie. It's just, and everyone goes, well, you've heard of Land of the Lost, that's why they're making it. Exactly. And I said, it was a piece of shit, that's the only reason I've heard of it.
It's whatever works. The film companies are owned by bigger corporations, and they just are obligated to generate cash so the stock prices will stay up, so that they can acquire a new telecom company.
But artistically, you find that sort of bankrupt.
I don't know. I have no career. I'm not in the film industry. I don't make my living doing that, and I wouldn't know how to do one. I would know how to do one of those films, but I don't know that I could get the enthusiasm up. Also, I think today it's in a much more controlled circumstances. They really study the script and they give you the notes and they tell you who's got to be in it. It's more like doing a 2-hour television commercial. The sponsor is the one that tells you what to do.
You don't feel like back in the day the director had a lot more artistic freedom than today's.
Well, I'm sure there's
filmmakers.
A handful of wonderful directors who have great track record, but I think even they, push come to shove, would love to be making personal films. But you can't make personal films, and if you're going to make personal films, you have to have a day job.
Right. And the so Apocalypse Now goes on for how many years?
Oh, I don't know. It was 200 days of shooting.
Because I swear, when I was watching Hearts of Darkness, it felt like it just went on for years.
It was a big, ambitious film, and pre-digital effects, so everything you saw was you were really doing.
Right. And Martin Sheen had a heart attack, right?
He was smoking a lot, and he was also in very good physical shape. He was running every morning for 5 miles, and finally, his system. Thank God, he's healthy and survived it, and is is still with us in such good shape today.
And how was it working with Brando? Did you have to sort of wrangle him, or was he coherent?
No, he's a brilliant man. Brando on Apocalypse was trickier than on Godfather, because the Godfather was pretty much spelled out. He's very easy to work with. He's very receptive. The way to work with Brando is you just put props around that he's likely to interact with, or just pick up a cat and put it in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And he's very honest what he does. He doesn't act a lot. He just basically behaves in a way that makes sense with what's around him. Apocalypse, it was trickier because he arrived very overweight, and also he's a very brilliant person. He knew that I had taken the film in a much more surrealistic direction, that I had sort of painted myself in a corner, and that now I needed to have something to pull myself out. And I had suggested that we do it more like Heart of Darkness, where Kurtz had the skull of bald head and is a more mysterious figure. He said that wouldn't work. And for the first, I only had it for 3 weeks. And for the first 3 weeks, we would just go to shoot, and we'd just be in we had like a trailer, it was a houseboat, and we'd talk about things, and he'd talk about termites, and very brilliantly, by the way. And I mean, he just was fascinating. But he was ultimately just stalling because he knew, he didn't know how to do it. And finally, then I'd get a knock on the door. I said, "Oh, Francis, the crew's here. Should we break for lunch?" I didn't break for lunch, and then we go back, and I was really sweating it,
And then the meter's running, and it's
the
your
meter
money.
was running, and I knew at the end of 3 weeks he was just going to leave. So finally, after 4 days, with all this interesting conversation, I come in one morning, and there his head is totally shaved. And I knew what that meant. And I said, "But Marlon, you said you read Heart of Darkness, and you said it wouldn't work to do it like that." And he said, "Well, I lied. I had never read it. I read it last night." And he grinned, and that was sweet.
And that's when you started with it.
And then we just started a little at a time. I said, "Let's just go up," and we put him in the darkness, and we had a light. And also, he was so big that, it presented a wardrobe problem. And he was supposed to be a Green Beret colonel, so
Right.
they don't make Green Beret uniforms in that size. So, I first...
There's no Lane Bryant for Green Berets?
I first suggested, well, let's just say that he's a guy who went over the edge, and we'll show him eating mangoes with pretty native girls. And he said, no. And I realized that Marlon was extremely sensitive and shy about his weight. He didn't want, my instinct would be, let's just go and show him as big.
Right. It justify it.
Yeah, I mean, he's a man who just had given in to the pleasures of earthly pleasures, and he was shy about that. So, anyone who's overweight is not happy about it. So finally, I just thought, well, if you photograph a big guy, you don't see that he's fat. He might be 7 feet tall. So
Right.
I dressed him in black and shot him that way, and I got a double who was 6.65, big guy, and I used him as portraying him more the illusion that he was like a giant. And that's the way I approached it.
Well, it worked, and I know there's so many trials and tribulations involved with it, but I mean, it's like any great story or any great moral or fable. It's just put your money where your mouth is.
It's a funny story because when Apocalypse opened, it was, I was reading Newsweek or Time saying this is the biggest disaster in Hollywood history the last 40 years, and and it really looked like we were dead. But it had this one engagement in the Dome Theater in LA, and it had this one engagement at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York, and audiences just kept going to it. I guess, because it was sort of a spectacle to see it. And but I was really, I used to lay on my porch and look out and say, I have this beautiful house, my children were born, I'm going to lose it, and I was really feeling sorry for myself. And then I decided what I'll do is I'll real fast make another movie, and it'll be like a comedy or something, and it'll make money, and then the money we make on the new movie will save Apocalypse.
And that movie was Porky's.
Now that movie was One from the Heart.
Oh, yeah.
My version of it. But nonetheless, Apocalypse finally just emerged as, even in people's memory, as like this successful, one of the better war films and stuff. People ask me today, well, Francis, how do you feel about the fact that the movies you're making now, you have to compete with such big successes like Apocalypse Now and stuff? I say, hey, Apocalypse Now was not a success. It became a success 20 years later.
Yeah.
But in its time, it really struggled. The joke was that the so-called film I made that beat the popular film to save me financially is what sunk me. That was One from the Heart.